So I came across this article titled "The Gen Z Gender Pay Gap Has Reversed with Young Women Earning More Than Young Men. So what's up with boys?" And I thought I'd give my 2 cents because this actually isn't anything new, and it's not anything that anyone with a 3-digit IQ wouldn't already know just from observing the world around them. Like, obviously, at this point, every institution in Western society, from legal institutions to corporations, education systems, and even just social norms and everything, like how the people around you act and the things people talk about, it's all female centric. It's gynocentric. Everything is designed in a way to maximize women's position in the world, and it's been that way for a while. And it's not just about maximizing women's outcomes, or maybe I should say it is that. It is about maximizing women's outcomes, but absolutely no concern is taken for how men are affected by any of this. And like I say, this is nothing new, but it is rare that any mainstream publication actually speaks about it. But this article and the study it's based on are coming out of the UK, so I don't know, maybe things are a little bit different over there. But if anything, my impression of the UK is that it's even more gynocentric than the US. But if I'm wrong about that, feel free to correct me in the comments. And I did skim over this already, but I'm interested to take a closer look and see how this is being reported. Because I'm assuming they're going to do the thing where they report on the issue. You know, the data is there, so they have to admit there's a problem. But I'm guessing they're going to do the thing where they report on the actual problem that's supported by the data, and then they quickly caveat that with something about how, well, actually, women still have it worse because, well, they just do. You know, I don't know. You get the point. You know how it goes. Okay, so let's get into it. The Gen Z gender pay gap has reversed with young women earning more than young men. So what's up with boys? For the first time in history, many young women are out-earning their male peers. As boys lag behind in education and employment, Ben Bryant reports on how this signals a deeper crisis in masculinity. See this right here. For the first time in history. Is it really though? Is it really just now the first time in history? The problem with any kind of data analysis you can do on employment and the economy and whatnot, a lot of times that data just flat out excludes people that are not, so to speak, in the labor force. And this data is from the UK, so I don't know if it's the same over there. But in the US, there's a much higher portion of young men that aren't participating in the labor force compared to young women. And some of that is young men voluntarily dropping out of the system. And that's usually for a good reason, because it's really not worth it for most of us. But even so, a significant portion of those young men that aren't even participating in the labor force, which basically means they've given up on applying to jobs, well, a lot of those young men did try. You know, they did try for a long time to get a job. But how many rejections, or really, I mean, you can barely even call it a rejection in most cases. These companies just ghost you. They just ignore you. They don't even respond to your application. So I don't know if you call that a rejection. But anyways, how many jobs is the average young man willing to get rejected from before he just gives up? You know, how many rejections would you expect any person to be willing to take before they give up? Because young women do not face rejection at anything close to the same rate that young men are. So the point I'm making here, when they analyze all this data to determine the average wage of each gender, they probably aren't taking all the young men into account that have already given up. Because if you include data for all the young men and young women whose pay is zero because they don't even have a job, then I'd bet that pay gap is a lot wider. Okay, I actually looked into the study to see if I was right, and yep, I was. It's actually a pretty interesting report because they did acknowledge that a much larger portion of young men have dropped out of the labor force compared to young women. And also, this isn't really important, but I just kind of found it interesting. They actually use the NEAT acronym like all over this report. So Whatever, it's kind of interesting. But anyways, so yeah, they do acknowledge that so many young men aren't even in the labor force, but still, even when they acknowledge that, when they analyze data for the pay gap part of the study, they were only considering young men and young women that are currently employed in full-time jobs. So not only are they disregarding all the young men that have given up, they're also disregarding all the young men that are actively trying to find employment. Because, like I say, they only included data in this study for people that had a full-time job currently. And I think this is a really important point to make because you look at this headline, the Gen Z gender pay gap has reversed. And then you look at this study, and the initial reaction I think most of us have is, okay, this is a step in the right direction. They're finally paying attention. Somebody's actually trying to do something about this. But then you look at the actual methodology behind the study, and it's like, it's so skewed in favor of young women. You know, it's skewed in a way so as to minimize the actual reality of the situation and just how bleak it is out here for young men. And I don't know about you, but it really makes me wonder, are these people actually trying to help young men at all? Because that's what they claim, but is that the actual goal here? Because if that is the goal, then why don't they calculate the data in a way that's, honest? Why aren't they representing the data in a way that reflects the actual reality of this horrid situation that young men, and really men of all ages, find themselves in? Why? Okay, whatever. So, right off the bat, yeah, the gender pay gap for Gen Z is probably like way lopsided in favor of Gen Z women. And I would bet my life savings, which isn't much by the way, but I would wager every last cent on the fact that the gender pay gap for young people has been in women's favor for a long time now. Like 10 years at least, probably more like 20 years. It's just that now they have to admit it. They literally cannot deny it at this point. The pay differential is so severely out of whack that even when they ignore relevant data to try to make things look a certain way, there's just nothing they can do at this point to try to paint the picture that young men are out earning young women. They literally just cannot lie about it anymore because even when they essentially doctor the data in their favor, the results still come up showing that young men are the ones that earn less. That's how lopsided it is. That's how big this gender pay gap is. Okay, well, let's go ahead and read this article. And don't worry, I'm not going to make you sit through any boring, irrelevant parts. One of the many findings of the Lost Boys report is that for those working full-time between the ages of 16 and 24, the gender pay gap has reversed. This means that for much of Gen Z, including those who have recently left university, women on average are slightly higher paid than men. In later life, this is expected to reverse and widen in favor of men, a gap that is usually attributed to greater male participation in higher paying fields and the motherhood penalty, which reflects the disproportionate share of childcare undertaken by women. Okay, here we go. Just like I thought. Actually, women are the ones that have it bad. Probably in the future, the gender pay gap's gonna reverse, so women have it worse. And here where it says, in later life, this is expected to reverse and widen in favor of men, a gap that is usually attributed to greater male participation in higher paying fields and the motherhood penalty, which reflects the disproportionate share of childcare undertaken by women. It's so, I don't even know the word to use, I guess. It's just bizarre that everybody recognizes that the pay gap, when it is in favor of men, it's not caused by any unfair reasons. When the gender pay gap is in favor of men, it is easily explained by the fact that men tend to gravitate toward higher paying fields, work longer hours, and of course, lots of women take time off or even retire early because, newsflash, somebody has to take care of the damn kids. And I don't know, maybe the person that takes time off to take care of the kids should be the one that's, I don't know, less willing to work longer hours? You know, none of this should be shocking. And the other thing, I don't understand why they would expect the current pay gap to reverse in favor of men as they get older, because all of those factors they attribute to the expected reversal. Like, let's look at this. What are the factors? Greater male participation in higher paying fields. Well, if young women are the ones earning more than young men, is it not probably the case that more and more young women are going into some of those higher paying, traditionally male dominated fields? I mean, we know that that is the case. Just look at the plethora of women in STEM initiatives. And again, I mean, if you pay any attention at all to the world around you, it is blatantly obvious that corporations want female employees and they do not want male employees. Especially with how bleak the dating situation is for men these days. You know, you all do realize that a whole lot of the men with these high-paying jobs, men that are in these corporations making hiring decisions, you do realize that a lot of those men are also struggling romantically, right? Because their salaries aren't helping them anymore. Looks is all that matters now. Women have their own money. They have their own status. All they need from a man, I mean, they evaluate it from a man's looks. Okay? A man's looks is all that matters. So when it comes time to hire a new engineer or a new crane operator even, I mean, whatever the job is, if it's a man that's doing the hiring, he is going to favor female candidates. Because duh, men want to be around women. And if it's a woman doing the hiring, she'll also favor female candidates because that's just the right thing to do. You know, female empowerment. Yeah. So I don't see any reason to expect that 20, 30, even 50 years from now, that men will still be outnumbering women in the highest paying fields. I really, really doubt that that will be the case. And the so-called motherhood penalty, I mean, that's always going to continue to be a thing to some extent, but that effect is also weakening more and more over time. We all know about the declining birth rate in pretty much every first world nation, and as women's wages continue to increase, more and more mothers are also going to be able to afford to pay someone else for their childcare needs. So, yeah, with all of these things considered, there's no way. There's no way. This organization that's putting out this study, which is called the Center for Social Justice, by the way. I mean, yeah, I think the name speaks for itself. But this organization, they can't just present the data and let it speak for itself. They have to make sure that everybody knows that women are still the underclass. Despite what the data shows, it's still women that are the underclass. Women are the ones that have it worse. You know, yeah, sure, young women are outperforming young men now, but just wait. Men are still the dominant ones in society. We still live in a patriarchy. Women are oppressed. Just wait. You'll see. But this subtle shift in the fortunes of Gen Z men and women is regarded by the paper's authors as a bellwether. In some ways, the gender pay gap is fascinating, but not really the point, says Luke Taylor, a researcher at the CSJ. It's kind of a symptom of a wider change. Much of that wider change is the collapse of work for men with lower education levels and the educational underperformance of boys relative to girls. There has been a long-term hollowing out of work in the industrial sector for men with lower education levels, and the expectation of that kind of work has very much changed, because there are fewer of these jobs, and now you might need a degree. Yeah, our society is fucked. It's all gonna collapse. You know, we need blue-collar workers. Blue-collar workers are the backbone of society. They're the ones that make everything work. Like your car, your toilet, the sewer underneath the ground, the electrical grid, and plenty more, pretty much anything you can think of. We need people doing these jobs, and we need those people to be competent. And the characteristics that make somebody good at school are not always the same characteristics that make somebody good at HVAC repair. Yet, as there's fewer and fewer of these jobs to go around, the way these dumbass corporate executives have decided, like the criteria they've decided to use in order to weed out applicants and find the best applicant for the job, it's by requiring a college degree. So instead of just hiring the person for the welding job that is the best at welding, they'd rather hire a guy with a degree in Russian literature or whatever because, oh, he has a college degree. It's a completely irrelevant standard. Even if it is a relevant degree, like a 2-year trade degree or something that they require for the job, I mean, that's obviously going to do a better job of finding a decent worker, but it's still not perfect because, I imagine something like a HVAC degree or whatever, if that even exists, like it's not going to be just hands-on. In reality, all you need to know for that job is where to connect the doohickey to the whatchamacallit, but instead of testing you in the field, and I'm sure they do some hands-on testing, I'm not saying they don't do that at all, but you just know. They make you sit down and take some BS multiple choice Scantron exams where you have to calculate voltages or read some circuit diagrams or something. Like, just hire the best man for the job. And if you're going to use some kind of degree or certification as the criteria for who you hire, then you better make damn sure the education system is actually focused on teaching the actual job. Less theory, more hands-on is what we need. But whatever, maybe the education for these things is pretty good. I doubt it, but I don't really know, so maybe I shouldn't be talking about it. Women aged 20 to 24 in the UK are now slightly more likely to be employed than men, while the share of young men not in education, work, or looking for a job is climbing. Okay, they constantly do shit like this. Look right here where it says women aged 20 to 24 are slightly more likely to be employed than men. See, they use that word slightly because, they can say it that way and it's not technically untrue. Technically they're not lying because slightly isn't an exact number. It's up to interpretation. But then you look at the actual report and it says that of those aged 16 to 24 who were unemployed from July to September 2024, young men made up 2/3 of the total. And they give the actual numbers, so there was 260,000 young men living the NEET lifestyle compared to 135,000 young women. So look at these numbers. Does that look like a slight difference to you? Because to me, it doesn't look like young women are slightly more likely to be employed. It looks like they are significantly more likely to be employed. And I know this data uses the 16 to 24 age range, while the article used 20 to 24 as the age range. But the actual report being referenced highlights this age range of 16 to 24. And I'm not going to bother to dig through all the data to pull out the numbers just for the 20 to 24 age range. So maybe if you do that, the difference is more slight, but I don't know. And even if that were the case, that would mean the author of this article specifically took the time to search for numbers that said what he wanted it to say. Because the actual report containing the data puts the data front and center with this certain age range, and that age range is 16 to 24. And the difference in that age range shows that young women are way, way more likely to be employed compared to young men. There's nothing slightly about it. In education, trends over the last 30 years have culminated in overall better outcomes for women. women outperform men on average at every level and every age group of the education system. Women perform better at GCSE and A level, outnumber men at university, and receive more first class degrees than men. I don't know what all of this stuff means, but yeah, it's basically just saying that women do better in school than men. Women tend to take on more degrees that lead to lower paying fields like education, psychology, nursing, and social work, while men hold a majority of degrees in subjects like engineering. But women have increased their share in some higher earning occupations. There are now twice as many female law school applicants as male, and almost twice as many female medicine and dentistry grads. These have relatively high starting salaries, although they involve much more time at university. Okay, so this right here is exactly what I was saying earlier, and this is in the same article. Same article, by the way. Up here saying, in later life, that pay gap is expected to reverse in favor of men because more men are in higher paying fields. Then down here, it talks about how young women are dominating in higher paying fields. Same article. I mean, at least try not to contradict yourself in the same article. Don't make it this easy for me. If you want to brainwash me, you're going to have to do a better job than that. I mean, Jesus, if you're going to say this up here, then just leave this part down here. Just leave that part out if you're going to say that up there. Don't contradict yourself in what, like 1, 2, 3 paragraphs later. Don't contradict yourself 3 paragraphs later. If you're going to try to brainwash and demoralize me, then at least make an honest effort. Because this is just, come on. Boys, meanwhile, are nearly twice as likely as girls to be suspended and more than twice as likely to be excluded. I think this must be how British people say expelled. I'm guessing that's what it means when they say excluded, because otherwise I don't really know what this is trying to say. And by the way, to all my UK viewers, why are you like this? Oh, bro, I've been quite excluded, yeah. Yeah, now I've got to put my book bag in the boot with my lorry in it. Got to get some petrol on the way home in it. Might as well just stop by the chippy for a snog in it. Just speak English. You literally live in England. So speak English. How hard is that? I'm just joking around. I love my UK viewers, you know. Monty Python is not funny though. You're never going to convince me of that. But I do respect all of my brothers in the UK. And I love you guys, even if you do talk funny. Their problems look even worse when you bring class into the mix. And white British boys on free school meals are the worst performing demographic, according to a Parliament research briefing. When it comes to education, we either need to accept that boys are more stupid or it's the system setting them up to fail. Whichever one it is, we need to recognize that boys are in need of a bit more support than they're getting, says Taylor. Yeah, I mean, maybe this Taylor guy is on our side. He seems like a good lad, but who knows? Brooks thinks that boys may benefit from a different culture. He examined the habits of schools where there was no gender attainment gap. What emerged was a boy-positive environment that really pushed the boys, had a fair and equal discipline process, made sure it dealt with problems around bullying, and also made sure that the boys understood the point of learning. He recalls a conversation with a head teacher who wanted to understand why boys were falling behind in her school. One of the things she noticed is that when she walked around the corridors, nearly all of the posters and celebration pictures of success were featuring just her female students. So she was looking at that and saying, well, boys are not seeing themselves as being educationally successful. You know, I think there could be some truth to the whole representation matters thing. You know, How many little white kids out there decide to play baseball instead of basketball because you turn on a Lakers game or whatever and it's like, yeah, these guys don't look anything like me. Maybe this sport just isn't for people like me. I can kinda see that, but I really think it's not that big a deal. I think it's really over exaggerated. What this article is talking about, I mean, the reason all the posters and celebration pictures feature her female students instead of male students, well, it's the female students that are making good grades and achieving success. So, in that sense, they deserve to be the ones getting the recognition. And for the most part, I just don't really think boys, or men for that matter, really let representation like that hold them back too much. It might have some effect, so I'm not saying it completely doesn't matter. But if you only put up pictures to celebrate students that are scoring high grades, and none of the male students are scoring high grades, then, I mean, at that point, it would just be patronizing to celebrate someone when they didn't actually earn it. It reminds me of a time back in high school. We had a talent show, and there was this one girl that was like quadriplegic, I think is what you would call it. You know, basically she was handicapped in a similar way to Stephen Hawkins. And anyways, so she sang at the talent show. So I guess maybe she wasn't exactly like Stephen Hawkins because she could like talk and sing normally. But anyways, this handicapped girl, she sang at the talent show and it was bad. Like her singing was not good at all. But after she finished, the whole school stood up and gave her a standing ovation for like way too long. And I'm just sitting there like, well, I wasn't sitting, I stood up too because I didn't want to look like a jerk, but I was just thinking, you know, you all realize this girl is not mentally handicapped. Like she probably knows that her singing isn't that great. And even if she doesn't, y'all do realize she has been watching this talent show the entire time. And she can see that y'all didn't give anybody else a standing ovation. So I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems to me like she probably was able to tell that people were only cheering for her out of sympathy. And I don't know, call me crazy, but I wouldn't want that. But maybe I'm the weird one. Anyways, yeah. See, the problem with all the pictures on the wall only celebrating female students, that in and of itself, I really don't see that as a problem. But it does show that there's probably a problem there that's causing boys not to achieve at the same level. But I don't think taking down all the photos is the right solution. Because believe it or not, I don't hate women and I don't hate girls. So if a girl scores good grades or whatever, celebrate it. That's great. She deserves it. But let's fix the system. You know, let's try to be fair to all of the students, regardless of their gender. Let's not support one gender while not supporting the other gender at all, because that's what's going on right now. Boys are not underperforming in all schools, which suggests that there may be lessons to be learned about culture. And there is one particular niche where boys continue to dramatically outpace girls. This is among top performers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM subjects. Okay, here we go again. But boys are still outperforming girls in the subjects that matter. See? Girls are the underclass. Patriarchy. Will somebody please help our girls? Somebody do something. Girls are being left behind. The British Olympiad are a group of nationwide competitions in STEM subjects. The smartest boys and girls in each subject are encouraged to apply, and they have to solve problems relevant to each subject under strict conditions. Participation in an Olympiad is voluntary, but there is a strong incentive to apply because awards strengthen applications to elite universities. The British Olympiads don't report gender distribution data, but the names of the 6 winners are posted online because they go on to represent the UK in the International Olympiad. What is clear from this data is that at the top level, female participation is often extremely low. For instance, in the British Maths Olympiad, just 4 women out of 60 have sat on the UK team in the last 10 years. Okay, so basically this is talking about how at the highest level of smart kid nerd competition, boys are still dominant. And like, who cares? This shit does not matter at all. Because by the way, just because boys are overrepresented in some international or nationwide STEM competition, that doesn't mean that boys are outperforming girls in STEM subjects overall. And they probably aren't, because if they were, that would actually be relevant. So if that were the case, that boys in general were outperforming girls in STEM subjects, then they sure as hell would have put that in the article instead of talking about British Olympiad, which hardly anybody even knows exists in the first place. But please forgive me if I don't care that boys are overrepresented in some niche science competition. And I don't care that it helps strengthen applications to elite universities. I don't care. That's not even relevant to the discussion. If this is the best you could come up with to try to counter the argument that boys are underperforming in your education system, then it's really not looking good for the boys. Because this Olympiad thing, that is a stretch. It's like, oh, don't worry about the boys. Yeah, sure, most of them are failing and dropping out. But I'll have you know, 3 of our schoolboys are actually really, really good students. And their names are Mohammed, Fingli, and Prahandajintadendabar. You don't need to worry about the British boys. They're obviously doing just fine. One inference from this data might be that boys with potential who are well supported by their schools, and independent or grammar schools are more likely to have the resources to do so, are capable of runaway success in certain academic fields. Another might be that women require more support at the top levels because they remain male-dominated. It's possible for both of these things to be true if boys are more likely than girls to be found at the top and bottom extremes of ability. The concern for some is that any new efforts to support boys do not come at the expense of unleashing potential in women. The next phase around boys' education is far more evidence-based research, looking in depth about what works best for boys in school in a way that does not negatively impact women and young girls' education performance, says Brooks. Tweaking how you view and support boys in school does not need to have a negative impact on the educational performance of girls. And that's the end of the article. And, I agree 100% that any changes they make to the education system to help boys do better, those changes don't have to hurt girls. And they shouldn't. But where's the reverse of that? Over the past 50 years, or however long it's been that they've been feminizing the education system, and frankly, the entire fucking everything system, every institution, where was the concern for how any of that was impacting boys? Where was the concern for any negative impacts that quote-unquote feminism might have on men? And why is it only now, after things got so bad, that they literally can't even doctor the data in their favor anymore? Only now does anyone even pretend to care. Only now do they feign concern and pay lip service to these actual real-world issues. Because this article, it does not convince me that anyone actually cares. I'm not convinced. But whatever. Let me know if you like this style of content. I know it's not really my usual style, but I figured I'd try something new. So let me know if you like this.